Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today at Inform TV, we're going to try to enlighten you as well as energize you, as our logo states, on what is really going on with world financing and with a special focus on the MF Global hearings that are taking place today, this 8th day of December 2011. Here at Inform TV, I brought this to your attention a few weeks ago, and I know many of you looked at me like, why is he talking about this stuff? This doesn't affect us. When in reality, what I've been trying to talk about to my audience for these past couple of months is the fact that agriculture is a microcosm over in the corner of your TV set, in the corner of our economy. If you look at agriculture and start tracking agriculture, you get clarity on what's going on in our world. And we all need to track it. And this downfall in the MF Global situation, where Senator Corzine, Governor Corzine, chairman of Goldman Sachs, suddenly is front and center, and what's going on relates to the Ag Committee. And the hearing today that's going on is a great example of the significance of agriculture in all our lives, both from a standpoint of feeding us as well as giving us a look at technology, markets, employment, all of the above. I also want to talk on, I've talked about the situation in Europe. Today the big summit was going on. By the time you will see this tape, most of you folks will find out that Europe is not doing anything to address their debt crisis. Why? Because their banks are insolvent. Many of these sovereign nations are insolvent. And the only thing that this summit did is they're giving 3-year loans to banks that are insolvent. Just absolute incompetent economic policy. And now we're taking a look today at what is a real small look and a clear thing that we need to follow to give us some of the ideas about what really took place in the fall of 2008, when our financial system collapsed and we still haven't addressed it. And that's why MF Global is so important, and why I want to focus on that today. Here we've got a guy that was looked at as a superstar, kind of as an Enron man, the chairman of Enron, how they had reinvented how energy was supposed to be handled, electricity. They were doing things on margin. They were doing things on self-created paper. And here we've got John Corzine, who was Goldman Sachs employee from 1975 to 1999, was actually chairman and chief executive officer 94 to 99, then became a senator 2001 to 2006, governor of New Jersey from 2006 to 2010. Then he loses to Christie, Governor Christie in New Jersey in 2009, and 2010, for some unknown reason, foolishly jumps back in as the chairman and CEO of MF Global, basically a spec house, and a spec house that was already in trouble by the time he got in it. By November of 2010, he resigns. And now, as we're doing our program today, he's in the news. He's in front and center of the Ag Committee. And one of the things I think I want you to think about is the fact that Corzine, like the chairman of Enron, I think what we're really finding when I watched his testimony, the opening part of the hearing today before the Ag Committee, I looked at a man that I believe was giving us an honest testimony of his thoughts. Now, he may still go to jail based on what his testimony and his actions that he took, But the reality, I think he's like the chairman of Enron. He was somehow followed, yet I don't think really knows what's going on. I clearly think that's the case with Corzine. And when we look at the things that are happening with this MF global situation, I think we have to just ask question after question after question, and the number one, of course, being who's in charge of our economy? Our worldwide economy or even our own? When we look at the testimony before the Ag Committee, the first thing that came up when I heard they were going to subpoena him was, why would you subpoena him? He'll probably take the fifth. And I think it was brilliant on his case or his lawyers to come in and actually talk. I think that was a great decision, and I kind of agree with some of the comments Kramer made on CNBC today that coming forward may indeed keep him out of jail or keep his sentence down. And when I heard about this, and we hear the media talk about how do we get to the bottom of this? The first thing that came to me as a person who has traded a lot of futures and a lot of options was, why not just go to the margin clerk? And finally, watching CNBC and reading a number of newspapers, I finally saw a couple days ago somebody had that. Why don't they just bring in a margin clerk if Corzine is going to clam up? But the reality, when I start listening to this hearing, this thing brings in many more options that we should look at. To be honest with you, I think if I would get 30 days of their ending statements, I could tell the committee probably more than Corzine or many of the people that they had testify today, as far as an understanding of what really happened. And that is what this Ag Committee should be doing. They should be bringing in somebody that really understands the game. For one of the things that Corzine put on, that he was not involved in these daily trading. How can you be head of a spec house and not be involved in trading? You're very, very naive, just like the chairman of Enron. That is the early conclusion I'm coming here. This guy has been oversold and overbilled for years, and it's finally come to fruition that he really didn't know what was going on in a lot of his jobs. Suddenly, I can relate to how would a guy drive down the highway in a state highway patrol car at 90-some miles an hour and not have a seatbelt on? Well, you do it if you're not real smart. And I really think that's probably the outcome of what we're going to find out about Mr. Corzine. He really wasn't as sharp as he's been portrayed as. And the whole mess that we're talking about, that Congress is trying to get the bottom of, they're talking to the guy that really doesn't know, when they need to just bring in a simple auditor or people that are familiar with trading. And here's the number one thing I want you to think about, and if you talk to people, is how were these trades really being handled? Were they being handled on a 24/7? Were these things somehow with electronic trading continuously, so there was never really an 8-hour block or a 16-hour block of time when there was no trading? Because one of the things that Corzine did tell the committee today was the fact chaotic trading was taking place at the end. So were some of these guys that were actually implementing the trades, maybe they were pulling some of these funds out, these segregated funds that were the margin money that really belonged to farmers or co-op elevators or individuals that were using MF Global as their trading house. And So we need to find out, if we're really going to get these markets cleaned up, we have to find out how this thing was handled. And I didn't hear or see any of that questioning by the ag community, the part that I watched of it today. And hopefully in the coming week I'm going to look at some of the testimony in depth. But the reality is, I think we're going to find that we don't have a clear set of guidelines on, you've got to close the books each day if you're really going to understand, is there money behind something? And the biggest question I want you, my audience, to think about is, how did the winner, the opposite side positions of what MF Global had on, how did they get their money and were able to run? I would do just the opposite of the Ag Committee. I'd have brought in, and the next hearing for sure, I would ask, who was the winner on the other side of MF Global's trading? And how was the Chicago Board of Trade and the CFTC and our in-stone regulatory system allowed this massive amount of winnings, because that's really what they were. They were trading margin, they were making a bet, and their bets were wrong. So it was a bookie game, it was a casino game where the card guys were actually making trades, but basically throwing cards on the floor, and all of a sudden, you're out of chips. And the winner just pulled the chips in and got up and walked away. The first thing both media and this House and Senate Ag Committee should be going after, we want to see, if you really want clarity in these modern markets, people, we need to see who won. Because we're always told that when things like this go on, it's because there was a hedger, there was a bank on the other side of position. One of these struggling banks that I just talked about needed this spec house to hedge their bets. I'm speculating, of course, that if you look at the downfall, and we have the right and we must demand the right to bring in who won, you're going to find out there was another spec guy on the other side of the trade. In fact, as naive as Corzine put on, he may even had snitches inside his organization that were telling the other side what these guys were doing. That's the thing that I got of the hearing. When you also look at how futures are traded, you know, you'll get a buyer and a seller of a product out there, but the way these exchanges have been set up for years, it's no different than a pit boss above us. Somebody is looking at these trades. And Corzine was extremely negative, just like anybody out there that trades commodities, is the fact there's always a pit boss above looking in. And was one of those pit bosses, in other words, those people that are watching these funds, whether it's their banker, this is a real can of worms, people, that needs to be looked at by people that know how the scam called derivatives, futures, options, and swap trades really going on. This is a market, and I want you, my audience, to understand, this is called a marketplace, which is really the ultimate gambling casino. What the hearings that they had on MF Global today were, they make Las Vegas look like a church raffle with girls running down in little skimpy skirts handing out drinks. The real gamblers and movers and the shakers of the world trade in the Chicago Board of Trade, they trade in NYMEX, they trade in ICE in Atlanta, the international change down there. That's where the real gambling of the world is going on. And unfortunately, we've converted investment markets into a casino. And that was one of the things when I was looking at this whole thing, watching CNBC, you know, the Rick Santelli, any of you that watch CNBC, he's always pushing that he is the marketplace. Baloney. He's a marginer, just like the margin was trading here at the MF Global situation. The Chicago Board of Trade, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange now, which is their new clever cover name, they're just traders. They need to be brought in big time, and they need to be held accountable to get this money back. This is an absolute farce by our House and Senate Ag Committee members to say, well, this is tied up in bankruptcy. They should be trumping that bankruptcy procedure right now. They should have the Justice Department in there trumping them, putting them on the sidelines, and making the Chicago Board of Trade and all traders in this scam called derivatives, futures, options, and swaps being taxed right now to make that thing whole immediately. In fact, the Chicago Board of Trade stockholders, as well as their bondholders, as well as their insurance policies, should be tapped immediately. And what a farce for the Ag Committee to have a hearing without that first and foremost being done, and bring that to the committee as well. And when we look at some of the testimony today, I've talked about who is on the other side of that position. That has to come out, people. And I didn't hear anything about that in the testimony. And we need to see what kind of volume they were really trading. We also have the right to know, was the trading that was going on, was it a sound clerk put on by an investment committee putting in orders, or was the MF Global mess a computer against computer? And I think we're going to find, if the Ag Committee would actually do their job, but I see no one on that committee, Republican or Democrat, have the brains to even understand the concept. Was this MF Global thing, were that an actual trade, an order put in by an individual representing the MF Global clients or their own money? Or was it somebody just running a computer program with somebody on the other side of the position that took all this money away with another computer? Was it computer against computer? I think we'd find that logically that's probably what was taking place. And how can we be stupid enough as citizens of the United States to allow that to happen and to call it investment? That is the whole thing that I want to make a point on here. And I also want to clarify the fact that they were trading sovereign government bonds of nations in Europe. At least that's what I get from this. Isn't that what you get from this? That in reality were junk. Yet instead of this guy with this impressive resume, probably as impressive as any business and political leader in our country as far as a resume is concerned anyway, how in the world can we have a system that when something is viewed on a financial audit basis, if there is such a thing as an audit anymore or an auditor in our world anymore, of you have junk, and then we have a legal and market system that allows them to recreate junk and trade it on margin. Now, because the reality is, if this Corzine was really the genius that they've been telling us he has been all these years, and it was truly investment, what should they have been doing with sovereign debt from Europe? They should have been buying it out dollar for dollar for what? 50 cents on a dollar? 30 cents on a dollar? 15 cents on a dollar. If the euro does what I think it has to do, the only way a sound business approach to investment would have been to negotiating with those sovereign nations and buying that debt from the banks or from the country themselves at a massive discount and arranging a massive tax write-off on the nation or the currency they were doing it on, right? Right. And so what we find out at a point in time when I say we're coming to a meltdown after the first of the year, if we can hold out that long, we have got layers and layers and layers of garbage investment, really, that is just bogus trading on margin to generate margin. In fact, I think if we're really going to get to the bottom of the MF Globals, the bottom of what are things actually worth on a one-to-one basis. That's what happened with the laws that came out of the 30s after the meltdown of our stock market then. And that was, I mean, nothing compared to what our so-called markets are doing today. What would happen if we would have a 30-day holiday and say, all these trades, they're closed out for 30 days, these swaps, these options, these futures, and the stock market in the United States will trade for 30 days on dollar for dollar investment. And if you want to do anything other than dollar for dollar investment, you go down to Glenwood State Bank or to Wells Fargo and you borrow the money. Back to the same system that our forefathers put after the meltdown of 29 to protect and to see that markets were based on sound collateral, sound investment, sound interest rates. And that is the challenge we should be pushing to our Ag Committee investing this thing. Because people, it will show us more about the meltdown in 2008 than we'll see anyplace else. We kept hearing from Bush and Obama and the Congress and the media about transparency. We haven't seen, we've had transparency. We've looked right through the issue, but we haven't any clarity. That's where I'm saying I demand of my audience here is that we put the pressure on these politicians. When are you going to bring somebody before the committee? When are you going to have somebody there that looks at it, that really understands this scam called derivatives? And it's an out-of-control scam. And the other interesting thing, they had the CFTC people, and I think I caught it. I was getting a second cup or fifth cup of coffee is probably a better explanation of. They were talking, the CFTC that's supposed to regulate this, only 4 of the 5 commissioners, if I heard it right, had any previous trading experience. How can you regulate a out-of-control system like is developed in our marketplace today when you have people that have no experience in what's going on? You can't, people. And that's how we continue to get these meltdowns. And when we're looking at this whole thing, we listen to our Ag Committee people today talk about how the futures markets and derivatives have served agriculture well in the past. Now, people, you got to realize, we only go back 2 decades, and all these materialized paper trading of stocks was not allowed. You don't go back very far. Now the farm sector, the pork bellies, the corn futures, the soybean futures, the wheat futures, that's went back decades. But when we have people on these ag committees saying this system has worked well, how has it worked well? When we've had billions and billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of subsidies, direct payments to farmers. Why? because the marketplace wasn't paying the farmer enough to cover his cost of production and to see that we had the food to eat. Instead of addressing the marketplace like Alan Repke and others in the sugar industry did, what did we do? We went to Congress with the system I put together for the industry to see that we had funds to open any door in Washington, including the Speaker of the House, to see that we could sell Tip O'Neill, that the fact that General Mills, Hershey Chocolate, and all these food companies, they're not looking out for the good of their consumer, they're looking out for themselves. And the reality is, if we're going to have reasonable supply of food and a reasonable price, we have to see, first and foremost, what is the function of the marketplace. It's not a gambling casino like's been going on for decades in futures trading of grains and pork bellies. It's like we did with Tip O'Neill. Came in there and said, we have to have a commodity loan level to support the bottom of the market. So factories in Moorhead and up and down the Red River Valley, southern Minnesota at Renville and across the nation, both in beet and cane factories, can stay there. They can have good jobs, they can have investments for their farmers, and be assured that they're going to get their cost of production covered with at least a minimal return on for the good people that produce this product and doing it properly. And when we look at this whole mess and this marketplace situation that is melting down here and worldwide, we have to bring back the reality of dollar for dollar investment. What's it cost to produce something? And the only way capitalism works is efficient producers, their costs are covered. And the sugar program showed the Ag Committee 20-some years ago how to get that done. For 20 years you've had all the sugar you've needed without massive subsidies. In fact, without subsidies at all, by just having a reasonable program into place to see that the speculators didn't erase cost of production like they've been doing in the grain markets that cost you tens of billions of dollars worth of subsidies. So the reality is, when these hearings are going on and you see these big resumes and the media talking and these congressmen talking on the news relating to MF Global and the European situation, all you have to say is, when are we going to bring a few leaders in that really know what's going on? When are we going to let a program like Inform TV educate the public, and not these windbags with an impressive resume, but in reality they don't have a clue what's going on? And I think that's what we found out, both by the people doing the questioning and making the answers today. We got people of incompetence and incredible naiveness running the system. Thanks for listening to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota.